Hi, this is Carl the Cobra Frutch, and you're watching Lights Out.
One of Britain's greatest ever fighters of all time adds yet another monumental moment to her career. We'll be asking the boxing fans, should Katie Taylor now be considered the greatest female fighter of all time? Jermall Charlo returned to the ring during the weekend after 29 months out of action. We'll be discussing what was the reason behind him not being active, and we'll be discussing what he does in going forward. Also, a monster of a performance from David Benavidez last night as he absolutely demolished his former two-weight world champion, Demetrius Andrade. It's the next fight to make, Benavidez versus Canelo. This is Lights Out. I am Faisal Khan, and this is podcast 67 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. With me, as always, delighted to be joined by my right-hand man, Mr. Mohsin Gulsher, aka Ron. Ron, thank you very much for joining us once again. How have you been, my man? And how's your weekend been?
Very good, thank you. Looking forward to this next edition of this pod.
Yeah. Obviously, before we do get started and jump into the podcast, just wanted to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for more Lights Out Boxing content. And if you want to check us out on all the social media platforms, below in the description are our links to our social media platforms. And once again, don't forget, we're proudly sponsored by Spartans Law. So if you have any representation in the courtroom, make sure you check out Spartans Law website, which again is below in the description. We're mixing it up today. Of course, with every podcast, we like to start off with a quick fire question. But today, I've left a quick fire question to my man, Ron. Now, Ron, I didn't ask you to send me the quick fire question. I'm coming into the sort of the deep end here. I don't know what the quick fire question is. I haven't had time to prepare, so the floor is all yours, my man.
Okay. I've thought long and hard about this, and I think the question that I want to ask you is, what is your most memorable boxing corner moment? You know, in between rounds, when the fighter goes back, talks to his head trainer, because boxing is such an individual pursuit, right? It's just you in the ring. Football, any other sports, they're like a team sport. You know, you've got other men there or women on the field who you could turn to. Boxing, you've just got your trainer who's kind of like your guardian angel, kind of who's kind of going to give you advice on how to kind of go about it. It's pretty manic because you're in between rounds. You might have gone down in the round or behind on points. To boxing and any these combat sports, that what is it? 1 minute that you have is crucial. So thinking back to all the memorable moments, all the great fights that we've seen, what's been your most memorable kind of moment there with the trainers and the fighters? Or
Rocky V, the Duke, the final. No, I'm only joking. Do you know what, Ron? Someone's asked me that question before. And I've asked that question tons of times, and a lot of people usually say, "Oh, it's got to be the Luis Castillo fight." But I'm going to sort of not give that answer because the answer I've got is pretty unexpected. I remember when Lamont Peterson fought Amir Khan, and I believe it was just a few rounds before the end of the fight. I remember watching that fight. I think it was only about 17, 18 at the time, and usually when a trainer's giving his fighter some advice, it's about tactics or what he's got to do to improve. But I remember, I can't remember who the trainer was, but I just remember how brutal the guy was with Lamont Peterson. Like, he was saying stuff like, "Oh, you was born on the streets. Your ass belongs to me. This is in your backyard, and he's embarrassing you in front of your home fans. He's going to go back to living a rich life. You're going to go back to being just another bum on the streets." And I just remember watching that fight, and I thought to myself, fucking hell, whether you want to see that as inspiring or as a wake-up call, is a different story. But I've got to go with that moment because
wow, okay,
I've never, ever heard someone speak to their fighter like that. But in hindsight, you look at it, it worked. I mean, that was a very controversial fight as well, but he got the job done. But I think what 6 months down the line he failed a drugs test. But yeah, for me that's got to be probably the most eye-catching moment of a trainer in the corner of his fighter that I've seen in my lifetime. What about you?
I mean, it's a very fine line with what a trainer says to his, his fight in that 1 minute. Obviously, he doesn't want to get him over aroused because he's got to keep him calm. He's going to keep instructions very clear and not give up too much information as well. Excellent, I love Ben Davison. Kind of listening to him in the corner. He's very demanding. He controls the situation. He calms his fighter down. He's been with, he's training a lot of great fighters at the moment. One for me that comes to my mind is I love Teddy Atlas. Great boxing podcast, great insight into boxing, and he is Mr. Boxing, isn't he? I don't know if you would agree. And it was he was in the corner of Povetkin, and Povetkin was fighting Chagayev, I think it was. And then the interesting thing was, obviously, Povetkin's English isn't great. So he was doing it through a translator. And it was, I mean, I didn't hear much kind of boxing instructions about keeping him on the jab or keep your distance. What happened was Povetkin kind of started off really well, and he was kind of, the next 3 rounds went to the other fighter. And it was a very inspirational kind of speech that he was giving to him. He's like, look, how long left? It's 18 more minutes. Give me the best 18 minutes of your life. This is your time. And clearly the tide was not turning for him. I think what turned it for him, it was kind of, he had to get very emotional and said, his dad, Povetkin had lost his dad. Do this for your dad, and make your dad proud. And when people will think of you, that kind of moment. It was like a very rocky moment. And Povetkin did go on to winning that title as well. So, I mean, Teddy Atlas is a very animated character in and out the ring. So. There's been some really other interesting moments. I think the one that caught me recently was, I think, Crawford versus Sean Porter. Did you hear what they said in the 9th or the 10th round?
That you're behind and you need to knock him out or something like that. Wait,
and
what?
which is exactly what he did. There's the other one. I mean, like, these are little comments I hear where I think it was Pacquiao was fighting. Oh God, he was fighting De La Hoya, I think it was. He's like, he's too, they did the Spanish translation. He's like, he's too quick for you. He's too good. And that fight obviously ended up kind of going against De La Hoya. But there's been some manic, chaotic moments as well in the ring. I mean, I've seen boxers being slapped by their trainers, like, what are you doing? Wake up. Or there's a one I saw recently where the guy said, go Mike Tyson, baby, go Mike Tyson. And and he ended up finishing the guy. So I think that's a very crucial moment. This is a do or die moment. You've got to either inspire your fighter who's probably on gas on empty, or you've got to give them tactical analysis. You've got to use that 1 minute wisely. So, I mean, I don't know how much I'd love to ask a fighter, how much do they actually take that on board? How much do they remember when they go back into that ring again in between rounds?
Well, I can tell you right now, if it's Chris Eubank Jr., doesn't really take much on board. But I actually enjoyed that question because you kind of put me on the spot there. I think next week you're going to be the guy that does the quick fire questions, and we'll sort of run into the lines then with you not letting me know what the question is until we start recording the podcast. But yeah, love to get the fans involved in that question. There's been some great moments, man. A lot of people say Luis Castillo was, what was it, round 9. I remember Fury Wilder 3 when Sugar Hill was just completely going at the guy. Oh, you need to jab the motherfucker, get in the motherfucker's face, and listen, we've got some very emotional trainers in this sport. I mean, you see them on TV and they're doing interviews and you speak to them, and then you see them when they're at work. I mean, I remember the Fury Wilder 1 fight, you said something about Ben Davison. There's a clip of him on YouTube having an argument, I believe it's with one of the judges.
Yes.
The 12th round. So, listen, they're under a lot of pressure, man. They're constantly concentrating on the fight. If you think about it, their game plan is more or less the reason why their fighter win or loses the fight. But a very good question, Ron. I really enjoyed that. We'll move on. We've got a lot to talk about, and we start off with what went down last night in Dublin, Ireland, as Katie Taylor become a 2-weight undisputed world champion by defeating Chantelle Cameron in the rematch via majority decision Firstly, massive congratulations to Katie Taylor. A phenomenal achievement. I know every time we've done a podcast and I've always said that she gets a lot of decisions going her way. But listen, I'm not a boxing judge. I'm going to give my opinion, but at the same time, I'm going to give credit where it's due. I thought she'd done enough to win the fight last night, and I thought her performance was a lot better. She raised the game. She stepped up. The tempo in the second fight. A lot of people are asking the question. Should she be considered as the greatest female fighter of all time? I think she's the greatest UK women's fighter of all time, but greatest female fighter of all time. That's something we'll come on to in a bit. Ron, thoughts on her performance? Did you have her winning that fight? Did you believe that she did enough last night?
Yes, I'm totally in agreement with what you said. Fought a better fight. Wasn't on the receiving end of a lot of unnecessary punches, which we've seen, where she's just fighting too much gung ho. I think it was a lot of it was a measured approach. She was kind of letting Chantelle Cameron come to her and countering those kind of when Chantelle Cameron was trying to go for an opening, but I think she gave a good account of herself. I think it was a great fight for women's boxing for as well. We've got to give credit to Chantelle Cameron, defeating someone, a GWOAT like Katie Taylor, gave her first defeat. And, on the back of that, after that fight, could we see a trilogy? I think that was being spoken up about at Croke Park, and Eddie Hearn's, being the promoter that he is. What do you think is the next step for Katie after this performance?
Well, I want to discuss the fight a bit. Obviously,
Yeah.
we'll talk about what's next for her, because that's a huge question. Because she's 37 years of age, but she's still got, I believe, another 2 big fights left in her. As I said, she fought a lot better than she did in the first fight. She kept the fight more in the middle of the ring. She was on the front foot a lot. And I believe she finished the fight a lot stronger. However, I believe there's a massive controversial moment in the fight, which a lot of people are talking about, is the knockout in the first round, which was ruled out. Look, I'm a firm believer of being sort of in the driving seat, of being, having the, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of, the word I'm looking for is, sort of having the fight going your way. And I believe had that knockdown in the first round, which was ruled out, had been given as a knockdown, I believe we potentially may have gotten a different fight. Because one, that's a 10-8 round, and two, that's Katie Taylor quite far behind on the scorecards, and that's Katie Taylor coming out in the second round, completely approaching the fight differently. The momentum, that's the word I was looking for.
Yep, great.
That took a lot of momentum away from Chantelle Cameron, and I'll just go back to what I said before. I criticize Katie Taylor a lot because I do believe she's been given a lot of decisions in her way in the past. I don't take nothing away from her. I believe she's an incredible fighter, and she's done wonders for women's boxing. But I just feel as if the referee had an absolute stinker last night. There was a lot of headbutting, there's a lot of hugging, but that knockdown in the first round, I would love for someone, right, involved in that fight to grab the referee, do an interview with him, and ask him why it was ruled as a knockdown. Yeah, she's off balance, but if you look back at the punch lands perfectly. She's not slipped. It's a clean punch. It's a knockdown. If that knockdown is given, we get a complete different fight. Now, we can turn around and praise Katie Taylor. We could say what's next for Chantelle Cameron. The bottom line is, Ron, a 10-8 round in boxing is huge. And that was taken away from Chantelle Cameron last night. If I was Jamie Moore, Chantelle Cameron right now, I'd be pissed. But I'm not. Katie Taylor won the fight. Massive congratulations to her. She fought a great fight. Chantelle Cameron's an absolute warrior. What's next? I like the Amanda Serrano fight. I still believe there's a question mark hanging over the first fight. I've got that down as the greatest female fight of all time. I want to see that fight again. However, I would love to see a third fight with Chantelle Cameron at Croke Park, or even somewhere here in England. Who knows what's going to happen? She's a global superstar. She's a massive attraction around the UK. But I do think the second fight with Amanda Serrano does great numbers. You bring that fight to Croke Park. You know, the Serranos are big hits over in the US, and everybody still talks about that first fight till this day. So I think that the best option is go for a Serrano rematch. But I wouldn't complain with a Chantelle Cameron free fight. But I also have to look at it. She's 37 years old. She's been involved in great fights. How much more do you think is left in the gas tank, Ron, with Katie Taylor?
I mean, what more has she got left to prove? You know, she's talking on the biggest, you know, kind of, I mean, how many titles has she won? You know, she's fought the best in her division. I mean, now she's kind of doing rematches, or, you know, she's doing a rerun of that Serrano fight. I mean, that was a great fight in itself as well. Could have gone either way. Then we've got the Chantelle Cameron, 1-1 now. You know, do we go for the decider? What do you think? I mean, does she have what left is she, you know, or does she fight a new up and coming fighter?
No.
I
Like
mean,
I said,
no, you don't want to do that. I mean, who's it? Caroline Dubois was
Yeah.
calling her out, so I was like, you don't want that. You know, like
wishful thinking. You know, they were discussing Katie Taylor perhaps meeting Clarissa Shields at a catchweight. We don't want to see that because there's only one winner in that fight. You know, Katie Taylor would absolutely have to kill herself just to go up to even get at a catchweight. I mean, you look at Clarissa Shields' last fight was, you know, at middleweight. I can't see Katie Taylor making beyond 150. It's just, it would be too much.
not at this point in her career.
No,
Not in
she's
this point.
37 years old, man.
Yeah, 37. She's had a remarkable career and something that's to be celebrated. You know, that's women boxing that is headlining in Ireland. You know what I mean? That's a big deal. I
Amanda
mean,
Serrano 2 at Croke Park. That's the fight I want to see. Next question before we move on, Ron. Is she the greatest female fighter of all time? I'm going to simply say no. Because my GWOAT is Clarissa Shields. Without a shadow of a doubt for me. And I think what separates the two, right, is, and this is going to sound harsh, Clarissa Shields never lost. She's done it multiple times in the amateurs. She's a free weight undisputed world champion. In my opinion, nobody will ever achieve what she's achieved in women's boxing. And that, I'm not disrespecting Katie Taylor. I think she's had a phenomenal career. She's achieved so much. But Clarissa Shields for me is the greatest women fighter of all time.
And Clarissa's got a lot. I mean, she's still quite young as well. She's still got a lot of time to achieve even more in the sport as well. But taking nothing away from Katie Taylor, I think she started off her journey in 2016. I think there was a text message that was shared by Eddie Hearn. You know, that she got in touch with Eddie Hearn and said
via Instagram, yeah.
Via Instagram, wasn't it? I read that. I was like, wow. You know, she was to kind of see herself in the future. She had been even happy with achieving half of that. But you look, you know, she's headlining, you know, a sport dominated by males. So she's changing, you know, the face of women's boxing in the UK, definitely for certain. I mean, the sad thing with Clarissa Shields is, you know, she is American, but she doesn't sell as much in America like what Katie Taylor does in the UK. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, and that's simply because the market for women's boxing isn't there. I mean, you got Michaela Mayer, who fights over regularly in the UK. You got Alicia Baumgardner, who fights a lot in the UK from the US. You know, the promoters in America have not hit the women's boxing market, and this is why we have to give credit to Eddie Hearn. I know Frank Warren's got a few female fighters, but you know, I've got to give all the credit to Eddie Hearn. Ben Shalom's trying to do his best with the Caroline Dubois and the Lauren Prices, and it's good. But I just think Eddie Hearn has done wonders with female boxing. You know, I think he's the man that kind of kicked that door down and took women's boxing to where it is now. I mean, you know, you look at the evolution of women's boxing. You know, we've had what? I think that's 3 or 4 undisputed world title fights now. You had Shields Marshall last year. You've had Shields Savannah Marshall French Cruz DAZN this year, and now you've just had these 2 fights with Katie Taylor and Chantelle Cameron. You know, we're lucky if we get an undisputed fight in the heavyweight division once or twice a year. I mean, I know we've had one, I believe, this year, Crawford Spence. Yeah. You know,
well, women's boxing has been putting the men into shame, but I'm glad that's something that's being addressed now, and we are seeing the best starting to fight the best. So credit to the women. But their difference is they've got a smaller pool of fighters, high elite fighters. So that's why it's easier to make those fights. What other fights are there for them to make that, which they're not going to make anywhere near that amount of money. So long may it continue. I mean, I'd love to. I'm excited to see what the next 5 or 10 years brings us. What kind of numbers they're bringing in. So
last night in the US, I believe it was the last ever Showtime boxing event. A massive shout out to Showtime, a phenomenal broadcasting company for boxing over the years. Gave some great nights to look forward to. But I think they kind of saved one of the best destructive and explosive performances that I've possibly ever seen, because David Benavidez last night did put on a destructive and an explosive performance by defeating Demetrius Andrade, via stoppage. 26 years old, and I've got to say this guy is an absolute wrecking machine, and he's hungry. Kind of sound like Mickey now in Rocky 3. But what a performance last night against Demetrius Andrade. The fight itself, I think went 6 rounds, but I think 4 rounds Andrade won. I believe he won maybe 3 of the 6, and Andrade, I think before the 4th was brilliant. I can't fault him, and he showed a tremendous heart. But I think last night, right, we may be looking at the next big thing in boxing, and Mike Tyson's labeled this guy as the monster, and he was an absolute monster, and he was a beast last night. David Benavidez defeating Demetrius Andrade. It was a fight that me and you talked about a few weeks ago. What did you make of Benavidez' performance last night, and what do you think the future holds for Benavidez?
First thing I want to say, he's a problem. And everyone in that division, he's explosive. If you look at him as a fighter, he's tall. He's got those long arms, that long reach, and he punches with intentions. You can see in the early rounds. Yes, I agree with your assessment that Andrade was given a good account of himself, but it just seemed like, okay, all right, I'm going to bide my time and get those shots in. And they look like they really hurt just by watching that. And you got to remember, Andrade is someone, who's never lost. Has he ever been dropped before, Andrade?
No.
To do that first time. And Andrade is known for his defensive skills. So he's not the most exciting fighter to watch in world boxing, but to do that to him, that speaks volume about David Benavidez's caliber, what he represents, and I'm sure you're going to talk about what next for him as well. But he's a massive problem. So I can't remember. I think Mayweather was kind of really speaking up about him and calling him that. Why is he not being mentioned in the pound for pound conversations?
One of the things that I want to touch up on about this fight, and one of those interesting facts about this fight was Andrade's defense and his kind of awkward style. Andrade is a former 2-weight world champion. He's a former Olympian. And when the fight got made, one of the questions I did say to myself was, how does Benavidez manage to break down Andrade? And boy, he completely broke him down last night. I know there's a few people on social media that are turning around and saying, but there was a low blow before the knockdown and that played a part. Listen, if you kind of watch that 4th round, there was a low blow. The referee stopped. He stopped the fight. He gave Andrade a bit of time to recover. But if you look at that fight last night and you just watch it from round 4 onwards, it was going one way. And this is why, as you said, Benavidez is a problem. And he's a problem because if he's managing to break down a defense like Andrade's, who's a very good defensive counter fighter, he's going to be a problem for the rest of that division. From round 4 onwards, it was just barrage punches after barrage of punches. The guy was staring him down. He was walking him down. He ate a few shots, which is why I think, if he was to fight a Canelo next, which we're going to talk about, defensively, he's got to be a bit better. I thought his footwork could do with a bit of improvement, but I believe the power's there. I believe the explosiveness is there, but I also believe in the hype now. And I do think right about now, this guy is, as you said, Ron, he's a problem for the division.
Okay, I mean that's something that's been, you touched on it, that he's the next fight for him against Canelo. Canelo's called it out and said, "Yeah, I want that fight. Let's just wait and see how that turns out." Do you see him staying at that weight, or do you see him kind of moving up to, I mean, potentially cruiserweight? I think that's what we're hearing as well.
Well, so you mean light heavyweight? There's talks of him going up.
Yeah,
to
sorry,
light
my
heavyweight.
apologies. Yeah.
No.
Do you think? Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, right? He's a very tall fighter. I believe he's 6'4". So
Mm.
you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he was to go up to light heavyweight. But you
Mm.
look at light heavyweight, right? You know, the two killers in that division, Beterbiev and Bivol, I just think would be too much for him right now. Going back on him staying at 168 pounds, you know, his last 3 wins, right, are against Demetrius Andrade, Caleb Plant, and David Lemieux, right, and they've all been brilliant performances. So I don't see the need to go up to 175 pounds yet, because I believe, well and truly believe, he has to fight Canelo Alvarez next. You know, Canelo Alvarez's last 2 performances against John Ryder and Jermall Charlo, you know, I don't think he was tested in those fights. But I do think that this David Benavidez guy will test him. He's 26 years old, and as I said, he's hungry. You know, he reminds me of a young Canelo. I remember Canelo at that age was just completely ferocious, you know, and I believe at 26 years old is when Canelo knocked out Amir Khan. I just looked at this guy last night and I just thought to myself, you know, we've got the future of the 168-pound division right now, you know, because like I said, he's beaten Andrade, he's beaten Caleb Plant, he's beaten David Lemieux. I believe he wipes the floor with both Charlo brothers. There's no point in fighting Billy Joe Saunders because he's been at the ring for 2 years. There is another fight I like. Now, I like the fight with him and Chris Eubank Jr. because I believe that's just an absolute barn fest. I really, really like that fight. But then you have to ask yourself, is Eubank Jr. tied in with Conor Benn right now? Does he want to move up to 168 pounds? But I think, you know, if you're playing devil's advocate here, Ron, you have to look at the option of Canelo Alvarez. And I do believe now is the best time for him to fight Canelo Alvarez. Where do you sort of stand with him fighting Canelo Alvarez? And why do you think that fight's not happened? Given the fact that Canelo's ruled the 168-pound division now for almost, 2 years, and every time Benavidez has had a test put in front of him, he's made light work of it.
We don't know the intricacies of why these fights don't happen, and you know, there was rumors that Canelo was avoiding the Charlos, and you know, I mean, he's put that to bed. So I don't buy that you know, Canelo is ducking anyone. So if he's calling out that after that, you know, he made a video. I think he published a video on one of his social accounts. Hopefully that happens. I mean, I can't answer that question of why that's not happened, but you know, the different trajectories, different, you know, the people are going in different kind of routes, you know, and since then, so there's no excuse why that can't happen, I reckon. So that hopefully that we see that next.
Well, listen, I hope we get to see it next. I think that's the fight to make at 168 pounds. I believe Canelo takes that fight. If he wins that fight, then he goes after Bivol. I also believe if Benavidez takes that fight does get made, I think he'll beat Canelo. I just think Canelo's on the decline. Don't get me wrong, probably one of the greatest fighters of our generation, but I've not been impressed with Canelo for a very long time. Is that because he's been going up and down in weight, or is that because apart from Bivol, no one's really had an answer for him? You know, I still get a lot of stick for saying this, but I even think Billy Joe Saunders gave him a good fight. After the Billy Joe Saunders fight, you know, he beat Caleb Plant. You know, he got caught out against Bivol, and then the fights after that, I believe, has been Golovkin, which I think was a pointless fight, the third fight, and then obviously the wins over John Ryder and Jermall Charlo. So yeah, I think Benavidez potentially gets him at the right time, and I think Benavidez beats him. We talk about the Charlos. One of them returned last night after almost 13 months out of the ring. Jermall Charlo returned last night and landed a points decision victory over Jose Benavidez. 33 years old now, Jermall Charlo, 33-0. You know, 2-weight world champion. But to not fight in 30 months, I mean, I know there's been a few issues out of the ring. There was talks of him potentially fighting Canelo before he fought John Ryder. But Ron, I think boxing only benefits from Jermall Charlo returning last night.
Been long overdue, hasn't it? Almost what, 2 years out of the ring? Was it longer? He's had various kind of issues with mental health. That's kept him out of the ring. So it's good to see him back. It wasn't one of his kind of performances that we're going to remember him for, and that's to be expected. You know, with that ring rust. Firstly, you know, he didn't even make weight, so you know his first bid was, you know, whatever he was going to get out of the fight, that was significantly cut. So I think it was just like, let's just get in the ring and see. Let's just see, you know, be in that arena again and kind of get that feeling again. His title wasn't on the line, but well, I think that's a tick box for him. You know, it was a good opposition that he was up against with Jose Benavidez. So did we learn much? No, but you know, at least we know that Jermall Charlo is a contender in that division. You know, he's someone. Well, you know, he's an undefeated fighter. You know, he's operating at a world level. So it's good to see him back in the conversations again in that division.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Look, I mean, you know, in my opinion, right? I mean, Jamel's former undisputed world champion, and Jermall's a former 2-weight world champion. But having said that, right, I believe that these guys, they've got so much more to offer to boxing. You know, 30 months out of the ring is no joke. But you know, you've got to look at the positives. And I know a lot of people have sort of slated him for not making weight. But I think the positives have to be, look, he's been out the ring for 30 months. He's come back. He's got a points decision victory. You know, I believe he landed 40% of his punches. He's got 10 rounds under his belt. But I also don't believe in him waiting around now. I think now you have to put him in with the best fighters at 168 pounds. I don't think Canelo's the right answer. I think a Caleb Plant's a good fight for him. I think Andrade is a good fight for him. You know, and he's got to stay active. He's got to stay busy. And I believe his younger brother.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Any British fighters you'd put in that conversation with him?
Listen, like I said right now, Eubank Jr. is probably the only one that's capable of fighting at this level, along with Billy Joe Saunders. And we'll know more about Billy Joe Saunders when he sort of returns, hopefully at the end of the year or whenever he's returning. But right now, if you're looking at world elite level, you know, Eubank Jr. has to be considered for these fights. These are the only fights that's out there for him, that and the Conor Benn fight. I can't see him fighting a Eubank. I just think next for Charlo has to be, you know, it has to be one of the big boys at 168 pounds. And that's Canelo, that's Benavidez, Andrade, you know, Caleb Plant. You know, he had a bit of a ruckus for Caleb Plant a few months ago, if you remember. So, you know, that's a good fight to make. They're both coming off of Caleb Plant sort of on the rebuilding phase of his career after 2 defeats. And Charlo needs to stay busy. And the winner of that fight, they go back into the mix. So I know obviously there was a lot of talk about mental health issues and, you know, there was issues, he's had issues with his brother, but you know, I do hope for his sake and for his career's sake that he's going to be a lot more active in 2024 and he does get those career-defining fights. I mean, you think about it, for a guy that's 33 years old and has not been in a fight where majority of the boxing world are talking about, is it a marketing problem? Is it a marketing problem?
I'm shocked that he's, you know, like you've mentioned those, how long he's been inactive for, that he kept his belts.
Well, that's the problem with boxing, isn't it? Listen, you know,
there's going to be a cut-off point.
The WBC are just absolutely, they're rats. They're rats, you know. Their fighters keep their belts for way too long. I don't even want to talk about it, Ron. Don't even want to talk about it.
Another pod, another day, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. Ron, what do you do next with Jermall Charlo then? But more importantly, how do we keep Jermall Charlo active and how do we get the best out of him?
It'd be interesting to see who he fights next. You know, he's just come off a very long layoff. I mean, we've got a few British level kind of British fighters that, you know, who would love to kind of get in the ring with him. But I think Jermall Charlo will probably take a few easier fights to kind of get in now, you know, get himself back to kind of speed, you know, to the level that he was at before. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he's 33 years old now.
Mm.
You know, he's a two-weight world champion. I mean, what's left to achieve? Obviously, the main aim for most fighters these days is, you know, financially they want to secure themselves, but they've also got to leave some sort of legacy behind. I think the best option, I agree, maybe another sort of like a fight to sort of, you know, get rounds under his belt. But I think in the summer of 2024, he's got to be looking at the Canelos and, you know, the David Benavidez's. You know, it's good to see the 168-pound division has got sort of like new hunters around the division. I mean, I know.
What about Billy Joe? I mean, let's do some matchmaking. What about Billy Joe Saunders?
I mean, I love Billy Joe Saunders versus Jermall Charlo.
Similar. I mean, they've been inactive and out of the ring. Billy Joe Saunders is probably going to have a fight, I hope, soon.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got a summer fight. Bring him over, and Billy Joe Saunders is back for a title, world title potentially.
But we saw last night what's left in Jermall Charlo, and I do think there is something left. You know, however, we need to remember Billy Joe Saunders sort of moved himself away from boxing after a heavy defeat to Canelo. So the interesting thing about Billy Joe's return is we're going to know what's left, whether there is anything left or whether there's nothing left. So listen, Charlo, Billy Joe Saunders, yeah, I'd be a fan of it, but we've also got to see what else Billy Joe has left to offer.
I'm interested to see. Sorry, I know this is slightly off topic, but what weight Billy Joe Saunders comes back at?
It's interesting because, you know, I mean, 2021 was the fight against Canelo. I think it's suicidal to stay at 168 pounds. That fight was at 168 pounds. You know, I'd like to see him go up to 175, go up to light heavyweight. You know, join the Callum Smiths and the Anthony Yards and the Lyndon Arthurs, the Watsis, the Azizes and the Bivos and the Better BFs. You know, make that light heavyweight division even more exciting. We don't know. I mean, I'm glad you brought up Billy Joe Saunders, you know, because you know I'm a massive Billy Joe Saunders fan. Um, I honestly believe Billy schools a lot of these fighters. I really do. You know, and
He's a very skillful
he's
operator.
brilliant. You know, when
Yeah.
I love watching Billy Joe Saunders fight. And I honestly don't think he did bad against Canelo. I thought he performed really well. It's just that, like I said, Canelo at that time was the elite level. Billy Joe Saunders just underneath it. It took one shot. That was it.
Billy Joe Saunders. I mean, the build-up was great. You know, as you expect. The verbal kind of attacking him, leading up to the fight. I think it's just...
What do you? It's all good asking me the questions, but where do you think Billy Joe's future's at? Where do you think his next weight is? And let's say he does come back, he has a fight in, I don't know, December. He puts on a good performance. What would you like to see him do next? That's if anything is left in the tank.
I think the real question is how. I mean, we don't know if Billy Joe Saunders is in the gym. Is he training? Is he active? You know, has he blown up in weight? This is what tends to happen, isn't it? You know, when you're out of the ring for so long, but you cannot knock him for his skills. You know, his boxing IQ wasn't known for his power of knocking, opponents out, but that might translate really well at a higher, if he was to operate at a higher level, higher weight division. So it really depends on him. Is he got the, has he got the drive to, kind of to fight back at 168 again? But there's potential fights against the Charlo that he could fight.
It's good that you brought it up because I watched the podcast of Billy Joe Saunders the other day and he did speak about a comeback. But he also said he's also into managing now. He manages a guy called Lewis Edmondson, who I've interviewed at a fight week in Bournemouth. And I remember I uploaded the fight and Billy Joe Saunders was kind enough to see that we tagged his fighter in and he followed us straight away on Instagram. So massive shout out for that, Billy. But I watched the podcast the other day with Billy Joe Saunders and he said something along the lines of like, I'm a two-weight world champion, and if I can manage a fighter to a world champion, I don't think that's a bad career. So there was no talks of becoming a free-weight world champion or a three-time world champion. But I do think he will fight again, and I think it's just to see what's left in the tank, because listen, I think he's a phenomenal fighter. I really do. I believe he beats Eubank again. I believe he beats Caleb Plant. Possibly beats Jermall Charlo. After seeing Benavidez last time, I don't think nobody beats Benavidez right now. He beats a lot of these fighters. Even these light heavyweights he beats because his boxing IQ is brilliant. His footwork is good. His movement is good. I always said he reminded me of Tyson Fury. They both boxed very, very similar to each other. So it's going to be interesting. Ron, I know we've constantly spoken about the day of reckoning on the December 23rd, but the $1 million question to that card was always, where's it going to be broadcasted? Is it going to be on DAZN? Is it going to be on Queensbury? Is it, I don't know, could be anywhere, but it is going to be broadcasted, and I'll do an Eddie Hernia live and exclusively on DAZN. It's going to cost UK viewers £20 or $19.99. Over in the US, $39.99 US. Were you surprised that the Saudis and Turkey Al Sheikh have gone with DAZN to broadcast the show?
I'm not surprised at all. I think it's just about whatever platform is best that they could, broadcast it to as many viewers as possible. It's we've spoken in a lot of detail about the lineup. They want people to be watching this. They want people to be purchasing the pay-per-view. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't really bother me, as long as I get to watch the event. I think they'll both do a good job of it. What do you think? Did you have a preference with who you wanted them to go with?
You know what? I couldn't care less because I'm not paying for it because I got my dodgy box. I just hope nobody.
Speaking of the zone, okay. I mean, this is something. There was a special person there that we haven't seen on our screens. I don't know if you were going to mention this.
Adam Smith.
Now, wow. He's coming back from kind of battling cancer. So, credit, all the best for him, for his future. Hopefully he's cancer free and, all good, best of health from us. But what a fight, what an event for him. He's got that iconic voice, hasn't he? Mm-hmm. That would make it a lot more appealing for me for me to know that Adam Smith is going to be commenting on that, kind of being that. I'm just jumping the gun here, but I'd love, I haven't seen him for years. All of a sudden he comes out. He was there supporting Katie Taylor. So.
I agree. And firstly, I agree with everything you just said. I'm glad to hear that he's healthy. I'm glad to hear that he's cancer free. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for his family. And I'm also happy to see him back at boxing events because he is the voice of boxing. I don't care what nobody says. Phenomenal commentator, phenomenal asset to boxing, and truly a wonderful man. And I'm privileged to have spoken to him on many occasions. Look, right. I think all the broadcasters out there, they lack an Adam Smith, and this is no disrespect to everybody. I was quite critical last week in podcast 66 of the Zone broadcast team of when they slated Daniel Dubois. I was quite critical of them over a few things, but there's rumors circulating around social media. Adam Smith is going back to the Zone. I believe he was the former head of. He had a massive part to play in Sky Sports, but there are a lot of rumors that he is going back to the Zone. I can't see it happening because of his look. If you look back at Sky Sports, the history of Sky Sports, the guy was there from all the way back to when Nazim Hamid fought Kevin Kelly in New York. This is how backwards you have to go with Adam Smith and Sky Sports. He's been there since the very beginning, even when Frank Warren was there with Sky Sports. So I don't think he's going to go to the Zone. I think he's going to stay committed to Sky Sports, even though if he doesn't go back to Sky Sports, it's kind of like you being a Man United. It's kind of like you being a Liverpool player. You're coming towards the end of your career. Why would you want to go to Man United? Do you know what I mean? Right. Yeah. So anyway, look, I'm happy to see him back. I would love to see him back in commentary, but I think obviously he's taken quite a bit of time out of boxing, and rightfully so. And I think the biggest positive in everything is he's healthy, he's cancer free. You and I have had a lot of history with cancer in our family. We know how much toll it takes on families. But listen, if it's for one night only on December 23rd, it makes the card even more exciting. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean,
Do you know what I
iconic
love about
voice.
Adam
You know what I
Smith,
mean?
right? Do you know what I love
Yeah.
about Adam Smith? Every time you see him, you go up to him, he's like, hello, how are you? He's always got that face about him. He's a wonderful guy. But yeah,
That's one of the interviews I was envious that I wasn't there when you did with him. You know, I could have sat there for ages, kind of just listening to him. You know, he's you know what he's experienced in the industry. You're saying, you know, when we probably got into boxing, you know, the Nazi Muhammad days in the 90s, and he's been doing it since then. So it's only the last few. I think he's been out for about a year. It's been over a year now. Yeah. So good to see him back, and we'll watch this space as to where we will hear that voice. Or maybe he's just being a fan. Maybe he'll just turn up to boxing events. You know, you never know, and just be like he was there that night. You know, and he was just in supporting his friend or Katie Taylor. I think you know he had some lovely touching words to what he said to her after her performance, and he speaks very highly of her.
Let's talk a bit about December 23rd, the DAZN broadcast, the actual event. Like I said, I'm not bothered about the money because you know we know how the world works these days with streaming and stuff. But I mean, I know you said you weren't really bothered, but I think I don't know, maybe Eddie Hearn's probably got a bit of a chip on his shoulder that it's going to be broadcasted. I don't know, but the bottom line is all promoters are working together.
Well, let's just hope it's not Dev Sani that's asking AJ questions on the night. That's all I'm saying, man. I think either you know Dev Sani's going to go home in a box or something from it. I mean, that's all I've got to say, right? I mean, let's just hope it's a DAZN representative that's got a microphone held and it's not matchmaking for AJ.
Yeah. And I think, look, I mean, no disrespect to Queensbury or any other promotional company out there, but I mean, it's a numbers game, right? Boxing, and I think you're going to go where most of the numbers are. And no disrespect to Queensbury, they put on good shows, but I always believed that DAZN was going to get the sort of bigger piece of the pie here.
Yeah, I mean, look, whenever I've watched BT, TNT now, you know, they always give a good broadcast. You know, it's well packaged program on the night, good commentators, good analysts. So you just want a really overall good package. I mean, and then you got the Saudis that will take care of the rest.
Well, it's what I believe it's 6 weeks now. Or no, sorry, less than a month. My bad. Less than a month.
What's the date? Today we're 26. Yeah, less than a month. You're right.
Less than a month.
So,
yeah. It's definitely a month. It's definitely a countdown we're all looking forward to. Ron, my man, anything else you'd like to add?
Just one last topic. I mean,
go for it.
What do you make? I don't know. I've just been listening to a lot of Talk Sport and with the Tyson Fury's camp and Adam Catterall and their views, and just wanted to get your take on that. What you made of it all? And I've been listening to it all, and I heard Simon Jordan kind of talking to, Frank Warren the other day, and Frank Warren had to say, about the comments of warm lager.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get. I mean, I know.
No,
I want to get
your
thoughts.
That's fine. Look, these guys all have a job to do, right? But they're also entitled to their opinion. Now, Tyson Fury is constantly in the front pages. He's always in, the headlines. There's nobody allowed to criticize Tyson Fury. There's nobody allowed to criticize him. I didn't know we weren't allowed to. Is nobody allowed to criticize his matchmaking? Is nobody allowed to have an opinion on who he fights? Look, the way I see it is right. And Ron, I'm a big Fury fan. Yeah, I'm my favorite fighter. He gets a lot more criticism than praise. That's the way I see it. But at the same time, look, there's always been a bit of an agenda against him. But I looked at a comment right on that video. Okay, right. Someone wrote a comment on that video. Yeah. They said, so Fury can claim that he's an ambassador of mental health and that he suffered with mental health. Yet he goes around during press conferences swearing and he's effing and blinding and his family act a certain way. you know, in this day and age, you got to take criticism. That's just how the world works, you know. And I think Adam Catterall, right? Simon Jordan praised him of how good he is when it comes to, um, you know, combat sports. He is a genius when it comes to podcasting and interviewing him. And I've spoken to him loads of times before. You know, but the guy's entitled to his opinion. And listen, everyone's entitled to their opinion. You know, you're going to get criticized whether you do good or whether you do bad. That's just the way the world works. You're not going to please everybody. However, Frank Warren also has a right to ask him why he said so and so about Tyson Fury. So, you know, they're not covering any more Tyson Fury's fights. But I do think what would be interesting is if Tyson Fury was to go on TalkSport. I would love to see that showdown with him and the rest of the TalkSport team. But the way, if you ask me what my opinion on it is, it's just how the way work. It's just how the way the world works. Everyone's entitled to opinion. What was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, it's just obviously it's a shame. I mean, I listen to TalkSport radio on my way to work and really enjoy their takes. And they've got some, you know, I love Adam Catterall. I think he's one of my favorite sports box. I mean, he does boxing as well as other sports as well.
Yeah.
But you know, I listen to his talks, and there was a 11-minute monologue that he did in regards to the whole Tyson Fury, and you know, he raised some questions. I think they were all legitimate. There was no sort of kind of agenda, no sort of kind of biasness. He just, these were the questions. These are the things that they were questioning about Tyson and his team on, about his not fighting Usyk and all that shenanigans. And I thought it was ridiculous of them to kind of not allow them, to ban them from the Saudi card, when it was, or whenever it was announced. So that was a shame. We missed out on that. And I like Simon Jordan, how he doesn't cut, there's no bullshit with him. He will go straight to the point, and he will, he doesn't care whoever is in front of him. And listening to what he was saying to Frank Warren, he put. Did you see that awkward interview where Frank Warren and Adam Catterall? I mean, they also,
I've seen it.
Imagine you were Adam Catterall. It's a very difficult situation, and I really thought, you can't really fire back at that point, because if you it's like you digging into a wound even more. That you're going to cut all your ties off with Queensberry, which is obviously a massive promotional company in the UK, and it's got the biggest fighters. So they don't want to deteriorate that relationship further. So, what did you think? I mean, what would you have done in that situation if you were Adam Catterall?
I would have spoke up. I would have spoke for what I believed in. Like I said, it's a matter of opinion. I go back to that comment I read on YouTube. Someone said that Tyson Fury claims he suffered mental health. He goes around swearing at people. He's been involved in, there's been things said about him in the newspapers about he's had certain opinions on people's homosexuality, and and then people are saying, but then he's an ambassador for mental health, and when somebody has an opinion about him, he doesn't like it. I mean, I believe in one of his interviews, he turned around and said, I couldn't care less what people are saying, but then you're not allowing those same people to come and cover your fight. So, I think it's a bit salty, but I do believe a showdown between Simon Jordan and Tyson Fury would be really entertaining. I mean, I've watched the first ever showdown between Simon Jordan and Eddie Hearn countless times on YouTube. But the way I see it is, again, I'll go back to everyone. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Let people have an opinion. If you don't like their opinion, speak up about it. Don't just sort of relinquish them. And that's it. You're not coming to my fights anymore. Look, we all know Talk Sports is one of the biggest sporting platforms out there. They cover pretty much every fight, and their content is, is brilliant. I'm a huge fan of Talk Sport. They're gonna say it as it is. They've been going strong for nearly 12, 13 years now, and some of the stuff that does get said on there can be harsh at times, but it's their platform. It's their platform. They're allowed to voice their opinion. And Adam Catterall, I don't think he did anything wrong, but I don't think Frank Warren did anything wrong. But you just got to be Tyson Fury. This is coming from a big fan of his. You got to take a bit of criticism sometimes. You have to be. This is a sport where hundreds of millions are watching you. Just take a bit of criticism. There's no harm in it. It's what these guys are in work for. Ron. That's the way I see it.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add, Ron?
No. So for the next few weeks, we've been very busy boxing wise, haven't we? We've had fights on for the last weekend, so it's something to look forward to. I think we need a little bit of a breather until we've got the day of reckoning upon us.
Well, no, we're not going to have no breathers because we're doing this every once a week. We've got Garcia versus GWOAT coming up. We've got Regis.
Oh yes, Haney and
Haney.
yeah,
We don't take no
Haney.
breaks no more now. Yeah, you wanted to start podcasting back.
I'm thinking of the British scene. That's what I meant.
Oh yes, okay.
The British scene taking a break. I think.
No problem.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we don't hear as much about the American scene unless you really are digging into it. I think, but in the British scene, which has been really busy, some really good shows that we've seen in the last few weeks. So let's see what the Americans can produce. And hopefully the Pro Grey and which I'm sure we're going to talk about, and Haney fight, that's going to be good. The face off was quite entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
They're both really promising fighters. So let's see. Hopefully we see some fireworks, some knockdowns. Yeah.
Well, listen, fingers crossed it does turn out to be the fight that we're all expecting. And like I said, December 23rd, baby, great card to look forward to, and a good way to end the year. That is all we've got time for today on the Lights Out Boxing podcast. Again, before we bring the pod to an end, I just want to remind all the viewers out there, if you haven't already, to make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell for more Lights Out Boxing content. Give us a follow on all of our social media platforms and check out our sponsors, the one and only Spartans Law. Again, all the links are below in the description. Ron, my man, thank you very much for your time. An absolute pleasure as always. The face of Lights Out, the number one guy of Lights Out, the man of Lights Out, who was on a great monthly salary. I could barely afford to pay my own mortgage. So, yep, I'll pay yours. But Ron, appreciate you coming on. And guys, once again, thank you very much for your time. And thank you for listening to podcast 67 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast.